Good day, dear participants. We are pleased to welcome you to a new episode of UmiUp Startup Experience. Today we have a wonderful guest. Our new speaker is Valery Krasovsky, co-founder and CEO of Sigma Software. Good day, Valery.
Glad to see you. Good afternoon, Alexandra. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. We are very glad to meet you today and have a conversation. We are confident that our startup will find it very interesting to hear about your experience, specifically how you created your company, how you grow it from a small business, and are now operating in many countries around the world, as far as we know. Our program is created with the support of the Ministry of Digital Transformation, Ukrainian Startup Foundation, and R&D Center Vinstars AI. And we will probably start now. The first stage consists of preparing questions for the speaker. If participants have any questions, you can leave them in the chat and we will address them in the second round. Great! Let's begin. Wonderful. Valery, please tell us how the idea of launching a business came about and how did you start?
There were 5 of us, and we started the business together in 2002. This was right after the dot-com crisis. It was a very challenging time, but we were eager to start, and at that time there were few service companies in Ukraine that were then called outsourcing companies. But I much prefer the term of service company, because it involves rather serious projects, significant digitalization of large brands, and complex solutions. It's not just a team of engineers, but a full service offering. I was a programmer with technical education, and of course I wanted to pursue this. I had been working in another company since 1998, right after graduating. I really enjoyed doing this. When the crisis hit, we created a separate department in that company and helped bring in many new orders from different countries around the world, mostly from the United States, I think. Then we decided it was a good idea to start a separate business together with partners. Our main partner, Volodymyr Beck, proposed this idea, assembled the team, and we started working very actively around 2003.
So you started with a small team, right? How did you actually get started? How did you come together and how did it happen that your small venture grew into something bigger?
Back then, we took on any work we could find. It wasn't like we had set a goal to reach a certain number of people or anything like that. We just took what came and worked. Whatever needed to be done, we did. There wasn't much work available at that time. The market was different, and we just grabbed every opportunity. But we really wanted to create a company with a very democratic atmosphere. At that time, many companies still operated an old, post-Soviet principles, where there was a boss and subordinates. We always tried to create a very democratic environment. I think we succeeded back then. Now it might seem strange to talk about it because many companies have the same atmosphere. But I believe ours was still quite unique. We wanted to build something really cool and awesome. Initially, we're a company from Kharkiv, right? At first, we were very hesitant about the idea of opening additional offices. A second office in another city, well, we didn't know. As a team, as a company, it was like a family business. And, well, what about other cities? It seemed difficult and unclear, and so on. But one of our partners, Dmytro Vartanyan, had great relatives in Odessa. Two cousins who were also technically educated, very talented guys. One of them now works at Facebook, and the other probably at Amazon. These are impressive people, doing very complex things now, which is nice to hear. So, the second office was in Odessa. We opened it, I don't remember exactly, maybe in 2005 or 2006. But now I don't even remember how many offices we have. About 19 countries, I think. The main office and main R&D are, of course, in Ukraine. There is a large presence in Poland, also in Bulgaria, Spain, Portugal, and now in Brazil. When we talk about offices, we mean places where developers are based. We also have developers in the USA, but that's more of a representative office, where people work in quite serious positions and more involved in business development. Though there are technical roles as well. Once you start opening the second, third, fourth office, it all starts to fall into place. The interesting thing about this process is that each new office feels like a new small company. We know that different places, even within Ukraine, have slightly different approaches to various aspects of life. So it's always like building a new small company, forming a new small team where everyone knows each other and frequently goes out together. It's really cool when you can create these small clusters of new little companies, even though the main company is growing and has become quite significant, nearing 1,000 people. To be honest, when I worked at my first job and the company I was in grew to 200 people, it seemed to me like an incredible achievement, like a huge business. But now 200 people feel like a small company.
Yes, because in comparison, it feels different on larger scale. That's a very unique story. Tell us about your first office. Did you all work from there? How did you gather the team? Was it through acquaintance, or did you search for young specialists, or did you immediately hire experienced professionals?
I think each of us had some connections, and we primarily gathered people we knew through those connections. Quite quickly, I don't remember exactly when, but we established an HR department that handled both HR and recruitment. And we adopted a more systematic approach to finding good specialists. Back then, there was this division where someone would say, I want to work in .NET, but .NET was just starting out. There wasn't an option to only work with what you wanted. It was more about working with what was needed. Many programmers had a solid foundation in programming languages. Many people started with C, C++, that provides a great understanding of how processes work internally. It's a low-level language, unlike the ones we have today. To program effectively, you had to have a serious grasp of how this process functioned within the computer.
Great, so the specialist and the team came together quickly. Who helped you organize your initial process? Did you already have experience? Yes, you worked in your previous job, but was it company your first startup? Or did you have any other businesses before?
No, I wouldn't say so. Before this, there was nothing really serious. We tried to create a small place where we made sandwiches or something like that, completely unrelated to programming.
Well, that happens.
So, nothing serious before this. I think this is the first real story. I think overall, because we are talking to startups right now, we have an unusual service businesses, after all. You could say we are a service product company because we not only invest in product development, But we also have our venture arm at Sigma Software, called Sigma Software Labs, through which we've invested in quite a few product stories. Additionally, my partners and I launched Seed Venture Partners, a venture fund before the war. It has already invested in more than 20 startups. By the way, we received an award from USF in 2023 as the #1 venture fund in Ukraine in terms of the number and quality of investments. Along this journey, we also created and sold a product company in cybersecurity called Clean.io. It's a very interesting story. We are not trying to systemize it, and it's about how, when you work on service contracts, you often gain a lot of valuable information from clients about the challenges or issues in their businesses. Sometimes you can spot something that could become not just a service, but also a product. The story of Clean.io is about a company we created and later sold to a large American company specializing in security solutions. This is a great product story that emerged from within a service business.
Cool. So you're not only working on your existing business, but also developing new products. That's really great. It shows new ways of investing, where you can also invest in new products while supporting already established ones. I think the creation of your venture fund is a fantastic opportunity for startups to receive fundings to get those first investments. They may not fulfill all their dreams, but getting initial funds for things like marketing or first development is a significant step for startups. Valerie, could you please tell us how you received your first funds? What was your first order?
The first order was likely from a client who was developing a product solution for the telecom market. This client was from Scotland.
Wow, and how did you find that client in Scotland?
Word of mouth. Especially when you are starting a business, someone knows someone. By the way, our second client was likely met by one of our acquaintances or a relative of our partner in the subway. They struck up a conversation, and that second client was from Switzerland.
Cool. The subway brings people together, you could say. Yes, I agree. Our speakers often share that word of mouth is crucial when you stand out by sharing your work and inviting others to join you. People might even take the initiative to reach out, and that's how you find your first clients, serious customers, partners, and even future employees. So it's a great story that it worked out for you that way. Was it client a large one? Was it a service-based contract or it was like investment?
No, it was a service-based business, with both the first and second clients. They were both startups, and they needed development for the solutions they had in mind. We provided that development. At that time, it didn't involve investment. I think we started making our first investments around 2007. Though I don't remember exactly. These investments were, of course, not all successful, which is normal. Failure is part of the learning process. We can talk later about what mistakes were made. And I understand, there were questions about that. We can discuss that as well. Also, investments in client products are quite common, especially when a startup client approaches you. They might be interested if you are not just working for them for money, but also investing a bit. This is appealing even to their board, knowing that the service provider is not just interested in billing a lot of hours. If you're investing, it's clear that you are motivated to create an effective solution so the client can raise more money. When a startup comes with an MVP and says, for example, here is $150,000, build me an MVP, we analyze and might say, no, you don't need to spend $150,000, let's do it for $50,000. For instance, we will create something that you can show to investors to see if you can raise funds later. Unfortunately, or rather naturally, many entrepreneurs, especially from the West, if they are not well prepared, if it's their first venture, they make a lot of mistakes. But we already know which mistakes to avoid. You have to be very careful with initial funding when you are developing. You need to quickly understand if you can attract external funds. Can you make people believe in you? Not just because you believe in it yourself, which isn't enough. And check if the product or solution will interest future customers. You need to do this at very early stage. You might have a great idea, but when you test the market, you realize it's not receptive or business model doesn't work. And then you need to either make a full stop or pivot, which is a term often used. Pivoting is crucial, even if it means completely changing your approach. We know many stories that have evolved this way. For example, Instagram, which was sold to Facebook for $1 billion, originally started with a completely different concept. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they made a significant pivot.
It's great that you help startups at the early stages, sometimes guiding them, sometimes assisting, and sometimes navigating. It's important to have such an institution, enterprise, or company that is willing to help. And that's really fantastic. I agree with that.
There is one issue, not exactly a problem, but something I've noticed over the last 2 or 3 years, as I worked a lot with budding entrepreneurs. There are a few challenges. First, people sometimes think you will tell them about a silver bullet. That's definitely not going to happen. Second, they might not listen to advice. They come for advice, you offer it, and they respond by saying they know better. So why come for advice in the first place? You have to be willing to listen to the advice. Third, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but it's a challenge I see. Sometimes people assume that if you are helping them, they can offload everything onto you. Help me with this. Sure, provide money. Yes. But when the funds run out, they expect more. And they wonder why you haven't recommended them to anyone else. I understand that investors are always interested in helping, but you have to realize that the main responsibility, the full responsibility, lies with the team. The investor can only help a little. Many people don't understand this.
Exactly. So it's beneficial for our startups to hear about these mistakes to avoid them in their work. That's the right approach. Of course, mistakes are inevitable, but they can sometimes be corrected or even prevented before they happen.
I'd like to add one more thing. Having a proactive approach. Don't think that the investor is thinking about you every hour. That's not the case. An investor invests in different ventures and has many other things to handle. But if you take a proactive approach, you need to pursue that. You need to understand that if you want something from someone, you need to make an effort. You need to be well prepared when making the right request. And then, I'm sure the boss, the investor, and anyone who wants to help will respond. But proactivity is key. I think it's very, very important. Don't just sit and wait for someone to come and help you with something.
Yes, you always need to take action, but not too aggressively, because you have to respect personal boundaries.
You need to be proactive, but how you're proactive matters too. You can be proactive in different ways, like sending constant messages every second, but that's not what I mean. There are many factors, such as when to write, what to write, whether it's like a letter or a message. Of course, calling right away isn't necessary. Also, in other countries, especially in the US, making a cold call is still considered normal. I never respond to them, but many people do. And there's a culture where making an effort, finding someone and calling them is respected. But given the number of meetings, travels, and other activities that business people are involved in, it's simply impossible to just pick up the phone and call.
Yes, exactly. There is so much to do, everything is scheduled in advance, so there isn't much time to respond to calls. There are many more communication channels now, and it's much easier to send an email or use various messengers. There is no need to call when you can effectively communicate through thoughts, position, or information sought this means. Thank you for sharing such valuable advice. We hope our startups will take it into account in the future, and when they're looking for investors or partners, they will follow these guidelines. And now I suggest we move on to the second stage of our interview. These questions from our startup participants. So, participants, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We also have some questions that you submitted earlier. And we will start from a question about how a startup can cope with high competition in a niche, how to identify competitors, and how to prevent competition.
Well, first of all, it's impossible to prevent competition, and competition is a very good thing. Even Google doesn't have 100% of the advertising market, so it's normal. Competition, by the way, is something that happens when you, for example, come up with a new idea or product. The first thing you do is check if such a solution already exists or not, and you evaluate the market. If it does exist, or even if you haven't heard of it, and are working on something eternally new, you might later see competitors emerging. And that's a very good sign, because it means that your idea is good, that it resonates, and that other startups are even able to raise funds for it. This is also a sign for you that you are working in the right direction. How do you make your company better? It's quite simple, but you need to find your unique selling point. I love using the example of two apps we all use every day: Waze and Google Maps. The story of the Waze startup is quite interesting. At first glance, it seems like it's the same thing, just another Google Maps. Why do it? Sometimes investors say you should never invest in the second Facebook, the second Viber, or the second Google Maps, and so on. But as I first heard from an Israeli investor who said I used to think that way, but when I gave $50,000 to the Waze team, I later thought maybe I made a mistake. You need to pay attention to match ideas if they indeed offer significant added value. The added value of Waze was evident when people were driving home from work and would call each other to ask where the traffic jams were, where the roads were clear, especially when communicating from Tel Aviv to their homes. They thought, why are we constantly calling each other? Maybe we should create an app that can see where the traffic is light and where the quickest road is. And that's what they did. It's a small thing, but it created a powerful competitor, which Google later bought. bought for about $1.1 billion.
Yes, and just think about how much it simplifies life. It seems like a small thing, but you can even check the road obstacles or construction works.
Of course, they continue to develop it. Then they got feedback from users connected with city traffic management systems, which added even more value. So you need to solve people's problems and find these unique selling points in addressing very specific issues. If you are B2C like Waze, it's about solving the problems of your app's users. If you're B2B, it's about understanding the problems and needs of businesses and how to solve them. And by the way, the best B2B startups often emerge from people who work in that industry. We have a great example. One of our clients, Infobrik, a Swedish company that started with 2 or 3 people who came out of the large Swedish construction business. They understood the need and the problem. There was no proper tracking of tools on construction sites and no proper tracking of workers. Very simple. Now I don't know if it's already a billion-dollar company, but it's a very large company operating on all construction sites in Scandinavia and is progressing very well. But again, these people came out of the construction business. They worked in that company, understood the problem, and even knew who their first customer would be. The best startups often begin when you know right from the start who you are going to sell to, but that doesn't happen very often.
Oh, that's really great. When you have the first potential clients, you can already focus on them as well. Not just on the consumer's need, but also on the needs of the company itself. That way, you can adjust your product a bit more.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's really cool. We have another question from Anastasia, and she is asking how exactly you motivate your team, or how to properly motivate a team in the early stages and how to develop it.
Well, first of all, the founding team of the product should be one that doesn't need to be motivated.
Yes, they are already motivated.
If a founder isn't motivated to do this, then they are not a good founder, and you need to find another one. When it comes to motivating a hired team, especially in a new startup with 5, 10 or 15 people, the leader's main task is to inspire new team members with their ideas. That's the only thing you can do. Not only inspire them, but also lead by example. It's not just about being a boss who hands out tasks and waits for them to be completed. It's about helping them. This doesn't mean micromanagement, though. It's interesting to talk about micromanagement because people often confuse it with timely assistance, which comes from seeing the bigger picture. What I always try to do, both in my company and in other businesses, is to look at the whole picture. If someone is working on a particular product or in a specific department, they might not see the broader view that I or their leaders can see. By seeing this broader picture, you can, for instance, suggest synergies between departments or companies that they wouldn't notice on their own. As a leader, your role is to identify these synergies and, firstly, prevent people from doing unnecessary things, and secondly, ensure that their efforts are focused in the right direction. I think this is what you should focus on, but don't do the work for them. People often confuse micromanagement with assigning a task and just waiting for it to be done.
Yes, that happens, but it's truly important because when the team works together, there are different teams like sales, marketing, development, and so on. The more team members communicate with each other, the better. But there needs to be someone who connected all these departments. At the early stages, it's really the leader who can unite the team and ensure that all departments work effectively together. Because, of course, in the early stages, there won't be a large number of team members of many resources for other form of motivations. So it's important to be an inspirational leader, someone who can provide motivation and positive energy to the team. That's really crucial. When you see a strong positive attitude from your leader, it makes the work easier, better, and more effective. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. And you've said it very well. It's really important to help coordinate activities, to help people find those synergies, and to assist them in structuring their work. In companies, these functions are usually assigned at different levels of the company development. It might be the role of the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, and the CEO, Chief Operating Officer. So yes, it's a very important function.
Great. We have another question, and this one is from Dmitro. Could you please tell us, after becoming a part of the Swedish holding, did the co-founders in your company change, or did everyone stay the same?
We gained a new investor, you could say, which was a Swedish company. And this happened in 2006. I am often asked if, knowing how things have developed, I would make the same decisions again. It's hard to answer because, like in the famous movie Back to the Future, we can draw two different lines and check which one would be better, then go back and make a different decision. But overall, I believe the decision was the right one, and all the co-founders remained in the company. We continued working more or less the same way we had before. The main point was that we never thought about selling shares or the company to anyone. Initially, American companies approached us, along with another company, and they both offered to buy 100% of the company. That wasn't of interest to us at all because we wanted to keep building the business. What we liked about the Swedish approach was that even though we now had a significant co-founder, an investor, they believed in us and allowed us to continue making the decisions we felt were necessary for the business development. Of course, when you have partners, there are always things that need to be agreed upon. But overall, we managed all the development ourselves, the way we envisioned it. I would say that since 2006 our internal perception has remained that it's still our company, and nothing had really changed. We just kept working as we had been.
That's really great. Could you tell us whether being a company from Ukraine affects finding new clients or opening business in new countries? Because, as we know, sometimes clients are hesitant to work with Ukraine due to certain economic issues or because of martial law. How has this process been for you, and was it easy to open branches in other countries?
Before the full-scale invasion, we already had offices abroad. which made things a bit easier. But of course, there were still many challenges. New legislation, taxation, and so on. I think our companies' lawyers now know the legal systems of various countries better than many leading law firms.
That might be the case.
Because we deal with these matters in conjunction with the business. It's very difficult to find good lawyers in any country. I don't know if there are many, but there are very few really good ones. Returning to the question, I would say this again. I want to talk about both service and product businesses. I think this is very important for our listeners as well.
Yes, I agree.
It's important for all businesses to have part of their team abroad. You need to do marketing, understand the market you're working in, especially for product companies that are scaling. For example, in the US, you need to have a strong team there. But it's completely normal for investors, even during the war, to invest in companies where the development is done in Ukraine. Because they understand that part of the team is abroad and part of the team is in Ukraine. Everyone knows that Ukraine is a country of great entrepreneurs and excellent engineers. I think we have the strongest brand in Eastern Europe. But of course, there are many challenges now, which we are constantly working on and trying to help with, by finding solutions in collaboration with our government. For example, it's very important that specialists can travel to meet with clients. It's crucial that we can reserve key personnel to ensure that the business continues generating and paying taxes in Ukraine. But I would say that some companies even come to us and say they want their team to be eternally in Ukraine because they want to support us in that way. However, there are large companies whose business continually plans stipulate that they cannot work with countries in a state of war, unfortunately. This mainly applies to big brands. But even then, we find ways to create teams where part of the team is in other Eastern Europe countries, and part of the team remains in Ukraine.
Cool, very cool. Now, perhaps a somewhat related question that fits this topic. How difficult is it for you to find employees now? How do you hire and how does the hiring process go? Do you currently have many open vacancies?
If we are talking about the service business, of course, since the start of the war and the overall global economic slowdown, we've seen many layoffs in large tech companies like Google and others. People are very cautious with money now, which, by the way, also bring challenges in securing investments and developing product companies. It's still unclear where the global economy is headed. When the conflicts in the Middle East will end, what will happen between China and Taiwan, and when the war in Ukraine will conclude. All these factors keep global market in very challenging conditions. But problems still need to be solved. Businesses need to be digitalized. And new functionality needs to be added for clients. So there is still significant demand for such services. Also, it has decreased compared to before the war. If we had, say, over 2,000 vacancies then, Now I think we have around 30 or 40 vacancies, but they still exist. Finding serious specialists is not easy. It's not that isn't very difficult, but it's challenging. When a specialist is highly skilled, they will always find a job. That's for sure. It's become a bit more difficult for junior specialists or middle engineers to find work, but I would say that there is always very strong demand for senior engineers.
Мгм, мгм.
Але я б сказав, що senior engineers, на них завжди є дуже серйозний попит.
Мгм.
Thank you for the answer. We have another question, also from Dmitro, which goes like this. What will change in service companies in the next 5 years? Will the development of low-code solutions impact the activities of such companies? And in general, will artificial intelligence also affect the work of service companies?
На роботу сервісних компаній.
100%. This is already happening, but there are many myths surrounding it. There's a lot of talk about AI will come and take away our jobs.
Так,
Yes, there are
I don't
indeed many
think
myths
that's
like
going
this.
to happen. Maybe someday, but not anytime soon.
Можливо, колись, але дуже не скоро. Тому що
Of course, low-code or no-code solutions are entering our lives, and there are many of them now.
Їх дуже багато зараз.
Мгм.
І саме
That's why, seeing this trend early
тому, що
on,
ми цей тренд
we started
побачили
investing in
досить
product
давно,
solutions.
ми почали
We began
інвестувати в
offering our
продуктові
clients
рішення,
not
ми
just
почали
custom solutions
пропонувати
from
нашим
scratch,
замовникам
but also
не просто
incorporating
ми зараз
existing
вам все
solutions,
зробимо з нуля.
where appropriate.
Але
Like for data management or dashboards, we have several product solutions of our own that we've developed and are growing within the company to automate various aspects of different business domains. So this will indeed be a trend, with service companies gradually transforming more into integration partners who not only provide services but also offer product solutions.
Які будуть не тільки давати сервіси, а й давати продуктове рішення. І, до
It's also
дуже
important
важливо
to look at
подивитися
this
на це з
from
іншої
another
сторони.
perspective,
З
from that
сторони
of product
продуктових
companies
компаній,
selling
які
solutions to
будують рішення для
businesses.
бізнесу. Якщо ми подивимося
If you
на,
look at many
дуже
companies
багато
and their
компаній,
P&L,
P&L,
profit and loss
то ми
statement,
побачимо,
you will
що
see they
вони
also
отримують
generate revenue
з
from
сервісів.
services.
Вони
They
частково
sometimes operate
працюють як
partly at
аутсорсингові
outsourcing
компанії.
companies.
Інколи
In
в них
some
навіть
cases,
половину
half of their
йде
revenue
від
comes
сервісного
from the
бізнесу,
service
навіть якщо вони
businesses,
кажуть, що вони продуктова компанія. Чому
even
так?
if they
Чому
call
так
themselves a
працює? Ми
product company.
намагаємося зайти на цей
Why
ринок
does this
з
happen?
іншого боку, сервісного бізнесу. Чому так
We are
відбувається?
trying to
Якщо
enter
бізнес
this market from the
приносить
service
якісь
business side.
рішення, то
This
бізнес
occurs
приносить
because
якісь
when you
рішення
bring a solution to a business,
однакових
even
бізнес-доменах,
if they
вони
operate
досить
in
унікальні.
similar business domains,
І
they
дуже
are still
складно
quite
завжди
unique.
знайти рішення на
It's
ринку,
always
яке тебе
challenging to
підійде.
find a market solution that
Тому
fits
дуже
perfectly.
важливо, щоб тебе
That's why it's so
допомогли
important to
інтегрувати
have
це
someone
рішення в
help
твій
integrate that
бізнес-процес,
solution
дописати
into your
це.
business process.
Дуже багато
Perhaps
таких
customize
прикладів,
something.
там, наприклад,
There
дуже
are
відома
many
велика
examples,
компанія
like
Palantir,
the well-known large
з
company
Італії, яка
Palantir,
працює над
which offers solutions for large
для
companies.
великих
It's
компаній. Вона
publicly
на біржі
traded, so you
можна
can
знайти
check their
і подивитися,
P&L,
їх
which
P&L
is
він
open.
відкритий. Там 50%
About
здається,
50% of their revenue
Значить, вони
comes from
кажуть,
the
що вони
service
продуктові.
business,
І це нормально.
even
Насправді,
though
що,
they identify as a product company.
будь-який бізнес, він потребує
And that's
якихось
normal.
унікальних рішень. І,
I am saying that every
розумно
business
робити
needs
це все ж
unique
таки не по
solutions.
формі
It's
чогось
wise to do
такого
this
продуктового.
on an existing
І вже на
platform,
це,
a product
хоча,
solution.
звичайно, є
However,
продукти,
there are
які
products that are simply ready out of the box,
але
installed and
дуже багато,
working.
особливо, коли ми кажемо
Someone
про
set it up.
low-code рішення.
Especially when we are
Все-таки
talking
дуже багато
about
сервісів.
no-code, low-code solutions, which require a lot of service. AI will definitely play a big role, 100%. And there will be a huge demand for people who can apply it correctly. Because you know what is AI? What does it mean? Where do you use it? What products do you use for it? So engineers who will have a deep understanding of which AI to implement,
все ж таки,
what needs to be
інженери,
customized to
які
make it
будуть
useful for
власне
performing
розробляти
certain business
які
functions
яйця
in
очікують,
all
щоб
organization,
дописати
those
це,
specialists will
як це
definitely be
налагодити,
needed,
щоб саме
and
він
their
був
demand
корисним
will
для
increase significantly
компаній,
from
які
what
бізнесу.
it is on the market
Організації
now.
Такі спеціалісти точно будуть потрібні, їх буде набагато більше потрібно, ніж їх є зараз на ринку. До речі.
Ну, якраз
Well, with a little more time, everyone will also master this because, as I would say, these technologies have only recently become trends and started gaining maximum relevance. They are constantly evolving with the new products, platforms, and chatbots being released every day. I think there will be a growing demand for products that incorporate artificial intelligence.
Саме на от продукти з використанням штучного інтелекту.
So we have a follow-up question from Vyacheslav. He asks, which technology will be the trend in your industry over the next 5 years?
Ні, ну, технологія...
Technology, you say?
Складно сказати.
It's hard to pinpoint
Я б
one
сказав, що
exactly.
буде більше все ж
I
таки
would say there will be more open source
базується
solutions
на
built
Java.
on Java.
І ми зараз
We are
бачимо, що
currently
все ж таки
seeing that
Java
Java
в
is prevalent among
більшості
clients developing
там
product
замовниками,
solutions,
які
with fewer solutions based on Microsoft
готові рішення
technologies.
все ж таки
Also,
менше
Microsoft
рішень,
has
які
a
базуються на
significant
Microsoft
share,
технологіях.
especially
Хоча
among
є
government
також
clients
дуже
and large
великий
corporations.
сегмент і урядових замовників, і великих корпорацій.
It seems that many product solutions will be built on other technologies like open source, Java, Python, and similar programming languages.
На інших технологіях, на open source, на Java і на Python, на таких язиках програмування, на таких мовах програмування. Знову ж
Again,
таки,
speaking of trends,
розмовляючи про тренди, я думаю,
I'm
що
sure that clients will increasingly
впевнений,
ask
що
for ready-made solutions, something they can apply immediately for
буде
maximum
набагато
efficiency.
більше замовники
There will
все-таки,
still be demand for custom
питати
solutions,
про
but they will
щось
likely be
готове,
based on
готове,
existing
яке вже можна
platforms.
застосувати, щоб робити все найбільш ефективно. Хоча все ж таки, я думаю, що буде також багато замовлень на якісь кастомні рішення, але все ж таки вони будуть базуватися на платформах.
Thank you for your answer. We have another question from Denise from the startup Vidar system. He asks, do you support defense-oriented startups that are located outside of Ukraine?
Interesting. If we are talking about defense startups outside Ukraine,
Мається на увазі дефенс-стартапи
Напевно,
не
з
з українським
розробки.
корінням. Ні, ми
well,
поки що,
we
я
recently
знаю,
launched a defense accelerator, which has been mentioned in several social media
Я
posts.
думаю, що про це було відомо.
We launched
Було
this
декілька
together with
посилань
partners,
в
including the
соцмережах на
Kyiv
це.
School of
Разом з
Economics, the
партнерами,
company Gnezis,
це запустили
their fund
разом
Flare
з
One Ventures, and
партнерами
our
з Київської
Sigma
школи
Software
економіки
Labs.
та компанією Genesis, їх фондом
Their
Flare
fund
Ventures.
Flare One Ventures,
І ми,
and our Sigma
Labs.
Software Labs.
І
We've
зараз,
just
до речі,
started the
почався
first
перший
batch,
батч,
selecting
який
7
буде
Ukrainian
7
teams.
команд.
So far, we haven't worked with non-Ukrainian teams,
Не з
but we are
українськими
building
поки що
many
не працюємо,
connections,
але
seeking
ми,
investors.
налагоджуємо дуже багато зв'язків
And
зараз
we
з
already
партнерами
have many
з України.
investors
І
willing to
вже є
invest
багато
in
інвесторів,
Ukrainian
які
defense
готові
product
інвестувати в
solutions.
українські дефенс-продуктові
The
рішення,
situation
тому що,
in
звичайно, у
Ukraine,
нас досить
though
унікальна
unfortunate,
ситуація
is
в Україні
unique in
склалася,
that
на жаль,
solutions
але
can be
вона
tested
така є,
directly
що
on the
рішення можна
battlefield,
одразу
allowing
спробувати
us
на
to
полі бою
quickly
і
understand
зрозуміти,
how and why
чому і як
they
їх
need
треба
improvement.
вирішувати. Тому я думаю,
It's a
що
situation where developing
нас
defense
досить
solutions
така
is crucial for the country's defense
склалася
capabilities.
ситуація, коли треба розвивати, звичайно, дефенс-напрямок для обороноздатності держави і для того, щоб,
Moreover,
звичайно,
because
тому
we
що
are
ми
involved in these
фактично дуже
solutions and
досвідчені
many
і
of
дуже
our
багато
military
наші
personnel
військові
understand the
розуміють, які
specific
саме є
needs,
потреби.
we can
І
compare
які
them
є
to Western
аналоги
analogs.
західні, з
Then
якими
we
ми також
also
всі
work with
працюємо,
and
зрозуміло,
understand
як зробити
how to
краще.
make them
Тому
better.
що
Because
такої
there hasn't been such a
українсько-конвенційної
conventional war
війни,
since World
напевно,
War
не
II.
було
Так.
з часів Другої світової, і
Many Western
дуже багато
solutions are
екземплярів
not up
там
to the
різних
standard
західних
of
рішень,
what we
вони
have developed.
не дотягують до тих рішень, які в нас є.
Так,
Thank you for your answer. We will continue. We have another question. Which Sigma projects do you consider the most challenging and why?
Oh, that's a tough one to answer quickly.
Так зразу і не скажеш.
We've done a lot of interesting work.
Я думаю, що ні. Багато чого цікавого ми
Of
робили.
course, anything related to driver assistance systems or autonomous
Е,
driving system in
систем
complex.
допомоги водіям або Autonomous Driving Systems – це досить складні рішення, так?
We've
Потім,
also
що
worked
можна
on
ще,
many
які приклади
interesting and
навести?
challenging solutions
Подумаю.
involving
Досить багато
connectivity
цікавих
and low-level
рішень,
programming.
які робляться з connectivity та low-level програмування, такі ж досить
I think the
досить
solutions we
складні.
developed for
І
Verizon,
я думаю, що рішення, наприклад, які ми робили для
which is major telecom
компанії
company from the
Verizon,
US,
Telecom зі
were
Штатів,
particularly challenging.
ми їм
We set
налагоджували
up server load
балансування
balancing and
серверів,
data
обробку
processing
даних,
for
тому що
them.
і там були досить
These were very complex
складні,
and
серйозні
serious
рішення,
solutions.
які ми
We used
там
various
використовували
existing
якісь там,
systems,
різні
but we
вже
also
наявні
had to
системи,
develop
але
a
дуже
lot
багато
from
чого
scratch,
писали з
because
нуля,
that's
воно так було.
what was needed.
І,
And of
звичайно,
course,
коли ти
when you
працюєш
work
з
with
великими
large
об'ємами
volumes of
даних,
data,
зараз це,
that's a
звичайно,
trend now.
даних
Data is
постійно
constantly
більше і
increasing,
більше.
so
Тому
systems for
системи
processing and
обробки цих даних,
efficiently
ефективної
utilizing these
обробки і
data are
застосування
very
цих даних.
important.
Там
There
дуже
are many
багато
very
дуже
interesting
цікавих
solutions
рішень.
in this area.
Ще я би
I would
сказав,
also say that
досить
blockchain
серйозні
development
і
is currently
складні
quite
розробки
complex.
зараз є на блокчейні.
One of our
Одна з наших
companies,
компаній,
IdeaSoft,
компанія
which we
IdeaSoft,
consider the
вважаємо
number one in Ukraine for
номером один в
blockchain,
Україні в
is
блокчейні.
developing
І
its
вони,
own
до речі,
product as
розробляють
well.
також і свої продукти.
One interesting example is the
Один з
product
цікавих
Global
прикладів
Ledger,
це продукт
which
Global
is an
Ledger.
AML,
Це
anti-money laundering
AML
solution.
рішення, яке перевіряє,
It allows you to verify the
там
origin of
даєш,
funds in a
свій,
digital wallet,
гаманець цифровий, вони можуть перевірити,
whether they are good or bad.
яке в них походження,
We are
гарне
even
чи
helping
погане.
the United
І ми
Nations
навіть
track bad
допомагаємо,
actors
United Nations,
and bad money.
Організації ООН,
Вау.
шукати все ж таки так погані.
So developing
погані
such systems, particularly in the realm of decentralized blockchain solutions, involves a lot of complex technology.
Коли мається на увазі ті децентралізовані блокчейн рішення, там дуже багато технологій, досить складних.
Дякуємо за відповідь.
Thank you for your answer. I think everything related to personal data is always more challenging because of the security solutions needed to prevent leaks and other issues. So we can understand why these are some of the most difficult
Ми
projects.
дійсно можемо зрозуміти, що це найважчі такі проекти.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And it's good that you brought that up because cybersecurity and all security-related solutions will definitely continue to grow and evolve. The demand will increase because bad actors are always finding new ways to break into systems. And good hackers are constantly working to block those attempts. We know this well from our work with the company Clean.io, which prevents AD space theft on major websites. Hackers replace banners and make a lot of money. It's an ongoing battle. Every time we block something, they find a new method. So it's a constant struggle between the good and the bad in the digital world.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it will always be like this. No matter how hard we try, there will always be a bad side. The important thing is we always have the ability to find ways to prevent it, as you said, by developing new technologies and new opportunities. Maybe this way we can make the world a little better. At least we can prevent people from stealing advertising space.
Супер.
Now we have another question. Why does your company develop multiple directions and clusters instead of focusing solely on Sigma? Why do you create and develop
Let me
separate
explain a bit
directions?
about the different directions we are involved in. The associations we belong to and the clusters we are part of, and why. One of the first associations we joined was the IT Ukraine Association. Also, we left and then rejoined later. I'll keep it brief. The first serious association we helped create was the IT Commit within the European Business Association in 2010, along with partner companies. One of the main reasons for creating this IT committee was to advocate and protect the interests of the IT business.
IT-бізнесу.
Так.
At that
Тоді
time,
вперше ми
there was a situation where the government was trying to either eliminate the ability to work with individual entrepreneurs,
можливість працювати з
FOPs, or significantly raise taxes.
або дуже серйозно підвищити податки.
We formed a serious delegation and went to the government to explain our development plans for the IT business and how the industry would be affected if they raised taxes or eliminated this option.
Ще були компанії, і ми прийшли, просто розповіли, дивіться, ось які плани розвитку IT.
We presented two scenarios,
Ось як це
one
буде
where the
відбуватися,
industry
якщо зараз
thrived and
підвищити
one where
податки,
it
або
declined.
цю можливість.
Fortunately, they listened to us.
І ми дуже гарно бачимо, що тут буде класна історія для країни, а тут буде погана історія для країни.
And we were allowed
І
to
тоді нам
continue as we
дозволили це
were.
зробити, до нас
They even asked us to
прислухались,
help develop
але
a concept
попросили,
for the IT
зробити
industry's
власне
growth
історію
over the
концепцію
next 5
розвитку
years.
IT-отраслі там, на наступні там 5 років.
It became
І
clear
зрозуміло,
that
що
this
це
needed to be
треба
done
робити разом
collaboratively,
компаніями, а
not
не
by
одній
just one
компанії,
company.
так?
To
І,
answer your
ми
question
всі,
briefly,
якщо коротко відповісти
we've
на це
always
питання,
felt a strong
робимо
responsibility
для того, щоб
towards
є все
our
ж таки
country and the IT
завжди
market.
була досить серйозна відповідальна складова
We understand
закритих
how we
за
can
наш
help
IT
its
ринок. Ми
development,
розуміємо, бачимо,
and
як
that's
ми
why we
можемо
invest in these
розвитку, тому
initiatives.
ми всі ці історії вкладаємося.
This was IT
Тому це була
committee
IT-комітет
within
на
the
базі
European Business
Європейської
Association.
бізнес-асоціації, і
Different
ця асоціація
associations
робить
do
різні
different
речі.
things. For example, we joined the
Наприклад,
Kharkiv
також
IT
доєдналися
cluster,
до
which
Харківського
does a
IT
lot for the
Дуже
city
багато
and
робить для
education,
міста і для
with
освіти,
various
і
projects.
дуже багато різних
As
проєктів.
Kharkiv
Є, ми, як
residents,
харків'яни,
we
як
feel
київ'яни,
a strong
звичайно,
responsibility for our city,
відчуваємо дуже
so we
серйозну
joined this
відповідальність за
organization.
місто, і тому ми долучилися до цієї організації.
The Lviv IT cluster
Львівський
is also
IT-кластер,
very important
дуже
and
важливий,
significant
серйозний
for the
кластер для
country,
країни,
being one of the
перших
first and
і один
largest.
з найбільших також, ну, я думаю, що на рівні, приблизно на одному рівні з харківським зараз. Але
They
теж
also run
дуже
great projects
класні
and programs.
проекти, програми роблять.
When we
Коли
first
вперше-
came to Lviv
вперше приїхали
and
до
opened
Львову
an
і
office
зробили
there,
офіс, до
which
речі,
was
це
probably
було,
around
напевно,
2014,
2014
it was
році.
important to connect with the local
Тоді
community.
було важно також
So we
доєднатися
did
до
that
спільноти,
too.
до місцевої
I think
спільноти,
it's crucial for us to be part of the community and
То я
develop
думаю, що
projects
для нас дуже
that
важливо
are
бути
beneficial
разом з спільнотою,
not just for
розвивати
our
якісь
business,
проекти, які
but for the business
корисні
environment
просто і не
as a
тільки для
whole.
нашого бізнесу, а корисні для бізнесу в цілому.
I'll
Хочу
give
навести
you
також
two
два
examples.
приклади.
We created the
Організація,
DIA,
яка об'єднує членів Дія Сіті.
Так.
City Union with companies like SoftServe, Alexsoft, Luxsoft, EPAM, NX, and others.
Я так думаю.
The new DIA.
Тому що
City legalization requires the creation of an organization to ensure that the regime worked well, to communicate with government, and to promote it so that more companies would join. So, there are different associations and different purposes. We've always been very active in social life and have always wanted to help the country, which is why we've done and continue to do these things. But we always carefully consider which products to join and what value we can bring to them. Another example is the Ecosystem Association, which was created after the start of the war and unites both product and service companies as well as venture funds. Our friends from the Ministry of Digital Transformation and the business community approached us and asked for help in creating this. Together with Genesis and Flyer One Ventures, we helped establish it because it was a very interesting new initiative.
Круто.
Another initiative we helped with is UA Tech Network, a consortium of Ukrainian service and product IT companies. It's led by Anatoly Klepach, who came to me with this idea after the full-scale invasion. It's a great idea. Unifying businesses in a network that allows companies to share experiences, projects, and collaborate while promoting our service IT industry.
Обмінюватися проектами, робити якісь проекти разом. І разом робити промоушен для
Especially for small and medium-sized companies
для малих і середніх компаній, яким зараз
that are struggling now.
Зараз усім складно, але
Так.
їм трошечки складніше. Так
So
що,
there are
да,
various
тому
ideas and
можливо,
directions.
така ідея. Тому
But
є
overall,
різні
the
ідеї,
social
є різні
aspect is
напрямки,
very
але
important to
загалом,
us.
я ж кажу, що для нас,
We've always
соціальна
invested
сторона
in it
питання
and
дуже
plan to
важлива. Ми
continue
завжди
doing so
вкладалися
seriously.
і думаю, що будемо вкладатися серйозно.
It's really great that you support such initiatives because it's important to find common ground with your colleagues, partners, and work together. Your company has been in the market for a long time, has experience, and has much to share, for example, with entrepreneurs and small businesses, and also to invest. So it's wonderful that you focus on this direction as well. I think we can move on to the final part of our interview, the rapid fire questions. I'll ask short questions and you can give short answers. So, let's start. The first question is, which thoughts leader inspires you, if there is
Я
one?
часто дивлюся
I
коротенькі,
often watch short videos of
відео,
Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos.
з Стівом Джобсом і Безосом. Я думаю,
I think
що
these
всі
two
два
leaders,
лідера,
even though Jobs is no
навіть
longer
якщо
with
Джобс
us,
зараз не існує, але він створив просто
have created
неймовірні
incredible
речі, і
things.
в обидвох
And
Стів-
there is
Стіва
a lot
Джобса
to
і
learn
Безоса
from
є
both
багато
Steve
чого.
Jobs and Bezos.
Так.
Yes, I agree, thank you. The next question, if you had to choose a way to relax, what would it be? Active or passive
Ой,
relaxation?
інколи хочеться пасивного.
Sometimes
Для
I
мене
crave
важливо,
passive relaxation.
переключатися
For
з
me, it's
роботи,
important to
як
disconnect from
подорожувати
work.
з сім'єю,
I really
зі
love
своєю
traveling
родиною,
with my
своїм,
family, my wife, and
Для мене
kids.
це дуже важливо.
I wouldn't call it passive relaxation, it's both active and passive at the same time, depending on how you look at it.
Especially if it's with
Yes, then
kids.
it's definitely very active. Great, that's wonderful. Next question. If you could have a superpower, what would it be? To control time or to read minds?
Часом чи читати думки.
Я не впевнений, що я хотів.
I'm not sure I would want to read minds.
Можливо, це
Інколи це не потрібно.
Sometimes it's better not to.
іноді це не потрібно.
Yes, sometimes it's better not
Давайте,
to.
якщо ми вибираємо
Okay,
керувати
let's
часом,
go with controlling time.
Controlling time, great.
Добре.
Next question. Is there a book that changed your life?
Яка змінила ваше життя?
складно зробити
It's hard to say if
сказати
one changed
прямо,
my life.
яка змінила,
But
але
I'd
я
like,
би,
to
хотів
highlight two
відмітити
books.
дві книжки. Перша, яку я
The
прочитав
first,
там в
which
дитинстві,
I
ще
read
вона
in
така
my
художня
childhood,
література, це,
is a work of
був
fiction,
«Граф
The
Монте-Крісто»,
Count of
але
Monte Cristo.
Олександра Дюма.
But it's
Але
more than just
там
fiction.
просто дуже
It's
багато
filled with
таких
emotions
речей,
and
це
valuable
просто художня
lessons,
література.
especially from the
Там
main
дуже
character,
багато цікавих
who
емоцій,
goes through
і
incredible
дуже
challenges
багато
and
є того,
achieves great
чому
things.
можна повчитися від людей, які там пройшли через такі від людини, саме головного героя, який пройшов через такі неймовірні складнощі, і чого він потім досягнув, і які
There were
навіть
even
було
many aspects
дуже
that I
багато
found
таких
applicable
цікавих
in business.
речей, які можна було, які я знайшов, як застосувати в бізнесі, в розумінні інших
навіть
людей.
так. Круто.
Навіть з цієї книжки. А потім, все ж таки, коли...
The second book is more professional.
Це була книжка
Lee Iacocca,
Лія Кокка,
Career Manager.
менеджера.
He was the
Це
head
людина,
of
яка,
Chrysler, the largest
керувала
automotive corporation in the United States at the time.
корпорацією автомобільною у Сполучених Штатах. Це саме Chrysler тоді був,
Ага,
так?
так.
І
One interesting scene I often
одна з
use,
цікавих речей,
almost
які
as a
я
joke,
часто
but it's still insightful,
Це просто який жарт, але все ж таки цікава штука.
Мгм.
Він казав,
is what he said.
«Мій батько
My father
мені
always
казав,
told me,
якщо ти
if you borrow money from
залишаєш
someone,
гроші, завжди
write it
ти
down so you don't
щоб
forget,
ти потім
because
не
it will be bad
потім
if
буде
you
погано, якщо ти це не
don't.
зробиш.
But he said,
Але
when
він
I
каже,
borrowed
коли я
$1
взяв
billion
$1
from the
мільярд
US government to
від
save
Сполучених
Chrysler,
Штатів на те,
I
щоб
didn't
я
need to
зробив
write it
щось
down.
компанію,
I
через що
remember
не
it
потрібно
every
було це
second.
записувати. Я
This
кожну
speaks to the
секунду про
responsibility
це
of people
пам'ятав.
who manage serious
Це про
matters.
відповідальність, до речі, людей,
It's important
які
to
керують
understand the
серйозними
psychological
речами.
burden
Треба
of
розуміти,
such responsibility.
як-
Of course,
яке
responsibility is a
навантаження
heavy
це
load.
психологічне.
Мгм,
Якщо
згодна.
людина відповідальна, це дуже серйозне навантаження.
Так, так. Тут точно. Але
Absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned a work of fiction as the first book, because there has been a trend among our previous speakers to name business-related books. It's great that you were inspired by a character from literature, which might indicate a creative side to your personality.
Такої творчої натури якоїсь.
Да, можливо, так і є.
Круто.
The next question. When it comes to study, which method do you prefer? Self-education or formal education?
Я думаю, що
I think both.
обидві речі в
Formal
нашому житті
education and
досить,
self-education are quite
досить
important in
важливі.
our lives.
Формальна
Formal
освіта,
education,
вона не те,
well,
що формальна.
it's not just
Я
formal.
все ж таки
I
більш
tend to favor self-education more.
самоосвіти. І вона для мене
For
полягає
me,
в
it's
тому,
about
що я
constantly
спілкуюся з
communicating
багатьма
with people
людьми,
who have achieved
які
significant
досягли
success in various
серйозних
fields.
успіхів у різних напрямках. І дуже
It's always
цікаво
interesting to
завжди
hear
чути
their practical
практичні
thoughts,
думки, чути
understand
щось,
their
які
perspectives
вони
on different
погляд
problems
мають на
and
ті чи
issues,
інші
and you're constantly
проблеми,
learning from that.
питання, і ти постійно вчишся на цьому. Тому це більше
So, it's not
навіть
always from
не з
books.
книжок. Звичайно,
Of
книжки
course, there are
досить
great
багато
books
класних
out there,
книжок, але
but the
оцей
practical
практичний досвід,
experience
який
you
ти
gain
отримуєш
from
від
people who
людей,
have
які
achieved
досягли
a lot
багато
in
чого
their
в
lives,
своєму житті,
is incredibly valuable.
Але
However, a basic education is also essential, in my view, for broadening your horizons, understanding how to solve problems, even if you don't like a particular subject or you're studying in school or university.
Якісь там проблеми, питання, навіть якщо тобі там не подобається там якась наука, яку ти вивчаєш там в школі або в університеті, це все ж таки
It's still very useful for learning how to tackle various challenges, develop your mind, and find creative solutions. All of this is very beneficial in business later on.
знаходити креативне рішення, це потім все дуже корисно у бізнесі, я думаю.
Thank you for that answer. We had a similar question before, but let's summarize briefly. What is the main trend in your industry?
Ну, да, можна підсумувати.
To sum it
Я
up,
думаю, що це
and
теж
it
може
might sound
виглядає
banal,
банально, але готові рішення
but ready-made solutions and AI.
Great. Next question. What is the most important value for your team?
Або цінність номер один для вашої команди.
Цінність, я думаю,
I
що
think it's support and reliability.
підтримка та надійність.
Oh, that's great. Important traits. I believe they're truly valuable, especially for a large company. They're foundational values, you could say.
You can achieve anything and learn anything, but it's crucial to have a reliable person by your side.
Надійну людину поряд з тобою.
Yes. Another question. What advice would you give yourself at the start of your career?
Почати її
To
раніше.
start earlier.
Even earlier, that's cool. Was it because you hesitated to start, or was it more about not finding the right moment?
Ну, складно сказати.
Well, it's hard to say.
Не знаю, да, ну, я думаю,
I
що
think it's a phase in life where you want to have fun, do cool and interesting things, rather than work.
Якісь там круті штуки, цікаві, а не працювати.
О,
Можливо,
Maybe that's it. I started working before I even began university, but it was more like side jobs.
Університету, але це такі
Nothing serious. But I was always looking for ways to earn something.
Серйозна робота, але я завжди шукав якісь можливості, щоб щось заробити.
Looking back,
Просто
I could have started my career earlier. Also, my career did start with playing computer games rather than creating them.
Розпочалася з того, що я грав в комп'ютерні ігри, а не створював їх. Але це для мене було також
But that
важливо,
was
крім
important
того,
for me
що
to realize that this field is really interesting to me and that's where I wanted to develop.
хотів би розвиватися. Хоча спочатку я хотів піти в
Initially, I wanted to go an automotive university, but I didn't even know what exactly I wanted to study. I love cars. That's a passion of mine that's always been there. But eventually, I realized I wanted to go into the field of information technology.
Стало зрозуміло, що хочеться йти в галузь інформаційних технологій.
Мгм. Круто, дуже класно. Наступне таке.
The next question. What skill would you recommend every entrepreneur to develop?
Я думаю, що
I think I would say attention to details and openness to new ideas.
і відкритість до нових ідей.
Клас.
ці дві речі,
These two things are incredibly important. Even though this is a blitz round, I want to explain why attention to detail is so crucial. It could be anything, a letter or a sentence in a contract that you overlooked, and it could later change everything significantly. It could be financial figures that you didn't take the time to review thoroughly, and then you make the wrong decision because you missed that detail.
Не хотів там детально працювати, полінився, кудись не поліз, а потім прийняв просто неправильне рішення, тому що ти не знав цієї цифри. І був такий...
I had a case shared with me by a very reliable business partner we've worked with for a long time from the United States.
Дуже давно ми з ним працюємо, бізнес-партнер Сполучених Штатів. Він колись на зарі своєї кар'єри був...
Early in his career, he was a vice president at Amazon in development. When Amazon was just starting to grow, he had a reporting line almost directly to Jeff Bezos. He told me about a meeting where Bezos gathered his unit leaders from different countries. Bezos took a thick report from one of the managers, opened it, pointed to a number inside, and asked, "Why is it like this?" The manager said, "I don't know. I need to consult with someone." And Bezos responded, "Are you lazy or stupid?" He's a tough leader, but it's a very important point. If as a manager you come to a board meeting or report to your superior and you don't know something, it means you are not in control of the situation. You don't know what's happening in your area. It's crucial to understand. When you are talking to someone and they can immediately answer all your questions, you know they have a plan, even if it's not perfect. It's not bad if the situation is difficult. What's bad is not having a plan or understanding where the problem lies. That's why attention to detail is incredibly important.
Thank you for that advice. Startups, take note of this and use it in the future. We have one last question in our rapid round today, and it is: what is your advice to startups in one word or sentence?
Well, it's good.
You
that
can go a
it's
bit beyond that. We will put you a bit in the box here.
Confidently move towards your goal. Don't stop, and constantly look around. It's important to notice competitors, see opportunities, find great new team members, and identify partners in a timely manner. Keep your eyes open, and persistently and confidently move towards your goal.
Круто.
That's great. Thank you so much for that advice. It sounds like a guide, like a mantra for startups. Wonderful. We really appreciate your time today, Valery. It was a pleasure to talk with you. You shared so many insights, tips, and even some jokes with us, which we really enjoyed. We are sure our participants found it very valuable. So, we invite our participants to join us for the next episodes of UmiUp Startup Experience program. Leave your comments, like, subscribe to our channels, and feel free to leave questions for our next speakers in the comments. We will be very happy for your support and engagement. Thank you again, Valery. See you next time.
See you. Thank you very much,
Thanks for your
Alexandra.
support.
Thanks to everyone who joined.